Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of concepts and ideas in current media. I'm the author of 5 books on philosophy, known as the Detmar-Haskell Dialogues, and they are The Nature of Aesthetics, The Nature of Ethics, The Nature of Truth, The Philosophical Equations of Economics, and The Nature of the Political Left and Right. If you'd like to make comment, you can give us a shout at my email, detmar.haskell@icloud.com, or leave a comment down below. And this week, we're going to talk about AI. And the title of our program here today will be, Will AI Destroy Jobs? So lately in the news, we've heard some concerns being raised about the coming artificial intelligence revolution known as AI, which will, of course, come to destroy many jobs, and this is a great concern for the economy. Well, is it truly a concern? Luckily, you are tuned in to the Philosophical Angle program, and we're going to delve into this subject and come to a conclusion whether it is good or whether it is bad for the U.S. economic outlook, or, for that matter, for the world economy. So let's start. First, we need to postulate that this is going to be a concern for the free market enterprise systems throughout the world. It's not going to be relevant to the far left totalitarian regimes, most of which are communist or fascistic socialist. So in order for us to get going on this, let's first define what is a free market enterprise economy. So a free market enterprise economy, if you look it up in almost any textbook, it'll say something like an economy that protects private property and market prices, are set by supply and demand, free of government intervention, which is fine. But for us, this is not precise enough. We're going to have to add an enhanced definition of the free market economy. So let's start with the ingredients. A free market economy consists of the following concepts: the good, freedom, a transaction, motivation, competition, cooperation, and the law of differentiation. And without these concepts being enumerated and defined, we'll not be able to come to any conclusion. So let's concisely define each of these concepts, because they all exist within the free market enterprise system, and if we put them all together, we will get our definition. So first, the first principle, which is the good, and that is that all life does that which is good for it. Secondly, freedom is the creation of a priority, which is a piece of knowledge, and the effectuation of that priority. Thirdly, a transaction is where there is a sacrifice in order to achieve a reward. One sacrifice for the person who demands something, and his reward for making that sacrifice. And a second equation is that the sacrifice equals the reward for the person who is supplying the product. So in essence, there are 2 transactions to complete a transaction. And if we add the equations together of the sacrifice equals the reward for each side, you'll come out with 0, because the transaction is concluded in that each entity walks away with what they desired. A sacrifice is made up of the risk, information, knowledge, time, effort, and if it's a product, we have to add in material. And the reward also equals the risk, the information, knowledge, the time, the effort, and any material involved in producing the reward. Next, if the sacrifice is small and the reward appears to be large, then there is great motivation to effectuate the priority, which is our freedom. Also, we are all living in a society, and so there will be others that may have the same effectuations of the same priority. This is known as competition. So when others make the same sacrifice to obtain the same reward, competition is involved. However, all life knows that competition is inimical to one's self. But all life wants to do good for itself. And since competition is striving to achieve goodness for ourselves, while others attempt to do the same effectuations for their priorities to obtain goodness, the total amount of goodness available will be limited. And thus competition tends to spread out the goodness. Therefore, entities that are trying to achieve a reward for their sacrifices will then invoke the law of differentiation. This says that all entities, such as companies that produce a product, when facing with competition, will diversify their product to differentiate it from direct competition. Thus, we see in stores the tremendous diversification of product lines because each is seeking to divert itself away from the direct competition and offer us much differentiation. Lastly, we see in addition to cooperation, we add in cooperation because many of the rewards that we seek are produced by more than one person acting together in order to produce a complicated service or product. A car is produced by hundreds of different people trying to push out a very complicated product. Finally, all this happens inside the concept of individual life entities doing that which is good for themselves. This is a biological certainty, and all life tries to do that which is good for it. So, the free market economy happens as the individual participants seek that which is good for itself, which requires cooperation and which produces goodness for society. So now we are ready to speak of AI producing efficiencies in the marketplace, and whether it will ultimately produce more jobs and new opportunities. Here's the explanation. In the free market transactions, where we talked about information and knowledge and life entities producing this knowledge in order to make their sacrifices in order to obtain a reward, which is known as work, when the sacrifice is combined with the law of differentiation, efficiencies in the product often appear to make the product, or that is the sacrifice, more efficient to produce a bigger and better reward. And let's remember that the sacrifice, that the smaller the sacrifice and the larger the reward, the greater will be the motivation and the will to proceed. So let's summarize briefly. The law of differentiation produces efficiencies within the sacrifice, mostly produced by the information and knowledge that the free will of the living entity applies to the sacrifice. Thus, those two concepts constantly create new products, and new products require new knowledge, and new knowledge is generated by the free will. And now finally this comes all together in doing that which is good for us. But is it ultimately good for us? So when an efficiency such as artificial intelligence comes around and produces new products that are more efficient, corporations are able to use that new efficiency in their products, and they are able to add to their profit, making them more viable. Well, since this happens inside the concept that all life entities do that which is good for it and continually do that which is good for it, they will have extra profit. And that extra profit will allow them to create more goodness for themselves. Any entity that produces will have the demand because we do all that which is good for us and continually do that which is good for us. And thus, we will always have greater and continual demand for more goodness. This greater demand then goes out and seeks more and greater or differentiated supply. So, although some people have lost their jobs, they are now able to supply new types of sacrifices for those that demand it because they will have new profit from the new efficiencies produced by the new effectuations of their priorities. Thus, continually and constantly, as new products through the law of differentiation are invented and new efficiencies are brought into the marketplace, creating greater and greater goodness for our lives through greater and greater efficiencies, the excess labor that it produces will then be able to fill the demand for more and more goodness that we will want to add to our lives. So in conclusion, all excess labor will always be eventually picked up and used when greater efficiencies come into the market. We know this because of the two dictums that dictate this procedure. All life does that which is good for it, and continually does that which is good for it, and the law of differentiation. One final problem we need to discuss. You might object to that the law of differentiation is only for companies that produce products and differentiate their products in order to avoid direct competition with other companies and their products and services. This is true, but it also is true for individual life entities such as people. If there were some people around who have lost their jobs, given the existence of adequate motivation, they will differentiate their will to seek other jobs and to seek other jobs to seek other ways to do their jobs. And they'll seek new ways through knowledge and acquiring new knowledge to qualify them to do new jobs by themselves or work for somebody else. They will do this because of the law of differentiation. Thanks for hanging in there and listening to this harangue. See you next week.